Hey guys, welcome back to the Project Nourish podcast. We're your host. I'm Megan Gump, a certified functional medicine practitioner and licensed restart instructor.
And I'm Casey Poe Campbell, also a nutritional therapy practitioner and licensed esthetician. This podcast is to talk all about things non-toxic, healthy living, wellness. What else are we covering? Nutrition,
Functional medicine,
all the fun stuff in our worlds, at least.
all the good nuggets of information.
Yes. So if you're interested in working with either one of us one-on-one, you can definitely check out our websites. Mine is caseypoe.com, or you can check me out on Instagram at Real Talk Casey. If you check out my website, I have a skincare consultation on there where you will fill it out and I will send you back some detailed product recommendations that are going to make your skin glow.
Definitely. And I'm Megan Gump. If you guys want to learn more about me or working with me one-on-one, you can go over to my website, megangump.com, MEGANGUMP, just like Forrest. And so if you head over to my website, there's actually an area where you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation with me. And so basically I'll take the time to just go over the consultation process, the pricing, answer any questions that you have. So head over there to get that scheduled if you want to work closely one-on-one and do some functional lab testing to get to the root cause of any symptoms that you're having. And then I'm also on Instagram at megan.gump. So you can go check me out over there for some recipes, my traveling adventures, take a look at my dogs and my chickens, all that kind of good stuff. And then also, you guys just know that Casey and I are not doctors, so anything that we say in this podcast is not to treat or diagnose a disease. But Casey and I, as NTPs, we just want to give you the best information that we can to make you your own health advocate. So with everything that we've learned, we just hope that this can be more of an educational podcast so that you can maybe get some nuggets to implement in your life and see some real improvements and some changes. And on that topic, so Casey and I actually today are going to be talking all about leaky gut. Mm-hmm. And I am really excited about this. So I am a certified functional medicine practitioner through the Functional Medicine University. And it was a great program where I learned all about functional lab testing and just some more in-depth information beyond our NTA training program, which is great. But anyways, they send out articles every single day. And so this is actually something that I got this week. And I thought that it was fascinating. And it had so much good information in there that I wanted to share it with you guys. So that's what Casey and I are going to be talking about today. Mm-hmm. Now, yes, go ahead, Casey.
Oh, I was going to say, it's such a juicy topic.
It's so juicy. Mm-hmm. And I think that honestly, so many people are dealing with leaky gut on some level in today's world because leaky gut in the old age, it was from real trauma, right? Like if you got a puncture wound to your intestinal lining, that's where you got the leaky gut syndrome going on. But in today's world, this stuff is caused by stress. It's caused by antibiotics. It's caused by a poor diet. It's caused by environmental toxins, so many different things. So that's what we're really going to dive into today.
Yep. The way that, and I heard this amazing analogy from Chalene Johnson. I forget who she had on her podcast, but basically the way that she described leaky gut. So if you picture the way that your intestinal tract is supposed to look, it should be like a nice brand new pair of Lululemon yoga pants. With leaky gut, it looks like fishnet stockings.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right?
That's like the best analogy.
Yeah. So just so you guys now have that visual of what a leaky gut looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, so leaky gut is definitely like a major cause of disease and dysfunction. So we've been talking about that. But at least 50% of chronic complaints are at some root cause, like leaky gut is an issue that we always find. Mm-hmm. It actually also is it can be the base for a lot of our autoimmune diseases that we have nowadays. Mm-hmm. So I know that's something that's really common, unfortunately, in today's world. But also like asthma, food allergies, chronic sinusitis, eczema, migraines, IBS, C and D, fungal disorders, fibromyalgia, inflammatory joint disorders, including like rheumatoid arthritis, RA. Those are definitely just a few of the diseases that can originate with leaky gut. Of course,
and
also,
how crazy is that? Like, you wouldn't attribute your like chronic sinusitis. Thank you for teaching me how to say that word correctly. Your eczema or some of these things that have nothing to do with your gut. Like, you wouldn't think that, oh, this is being caused by leaky gut syndrome. Yeah, it's just so crazy. Goes back to all health begins in the gut.
Yeah, but that's the other wild thing too, is like I talk to so many clients every single day that have so many different issues, whether it is just food allergies or PMS or chronic joint pain. And it's like, we always have to go back to the gut, especially with like, today we're talking about leaky gut, but you've heard me, if you've been on this podcast before, talk about like parasites and pathogens and bacterial growth. I mean, so many people are dealing with those chronic infections. And this is just one piece of that. Leaky gut for sure always comes with that because of the permeability that those pathogenic organisms has created. But yeah, and the other thing too is leaky gut, going beyond like PMS and those other things that I mentioned, but you talk about like chronic fatigue and like immune deficiencies, like leaky gut is always the real basis for that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, it's interesting just how many conversations I have with the athletes that I'm working with doing the sugar detox. And, they're so concerned about, how many grams of carbohydrate should I have or whatever. And I'm like, dude, why don't you worry about like not shitting out pieces of spinach, first of all? And then we could let's fix your gut first.
Yeah.
And then we can fine tune it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to matter if your gut is looking like fishnet stockings.
Right? Yeah. And I mean, definitely sealing up the permeability is always the first step in any healing protocol. I mean, you've got to make sure the integrity of that gut is healthy so that you can absorb your nutrients, you can make your hormones properly, you can make your neurotransmitters. I mean, your serotonin, your dopamine are primarily made in your gut. Like, that's huge.
Yeah.
So
I just have to say something it's not funny, but it was really funny in this article is when they're talking about like the trauma of either a sword or a spear. Like, I'm so lucky happy we don't sword fight anymore. Like, one less thing to worry about, a way of getting leaky gut syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Can you imagine? And that's what I was talking about earlier, is it's like primarily it was from trauma, like to the gut.
Yeah.
But nowadays, unfortunately, like I was mentioning, stress in your diet and environment, but primarily it's antibiotics, which is wild. So secondary, it's like the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, like the NSAIDs, Motrin, Aleve, Advil. I mean, those are the major cause of leaky gut because they're so viscously inflamed in the intestinal lining. So it's just causing like a widening of the spaces between the cells. So like your tight junctions are the little spaces that are in between every single cell in your intestinal lining. And the NSAIDs and like Advil, Motrin, I mean, you talk about stuff that you take just for pain and like a common headache. It's literally causing those tight junctions to open up.
Things you would need if you got stabbed with a sword.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the way that
more leaky gut.
Damn it. The way that I would like kind of picture it is, so let's imagine that your lining is kind of like a brick wall. These guys are going in there and just kind of like poking out those bricks.
Yeah, totally.
Is the way that I kind of imagine it.
Yeah, that's a good way to imagine it. I always imagine it as like you have a wall and you've got someone that's really pissed off and they're just basically going around the room and punching holes.
Oh yeah, there you go. angry little insects.
Yeah, I mean, dude, that's pretty much what they are.
Yeah.
Other common causes like chemotherapy, alcohol, you guys. So for all my heavy drinkers out there, I know it's sad. My best advice is like, keep it Friday and Saturday nights. Like if you cannot drink Sunday through Thursday, you're doing your body a world of a difference. So for all those, I guess, I almost wanted to point out moms just because I feel like it's so common in my clients for like my moms to be like, I drink wine at night. It's just what I need. I'm not picking on you moms, but I'm just saying, keep the glasses of wine for Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Please, moms, do not send us hate mail.
I know, we love you.
drink kombucha out of a wine glass.
Yeah.
It's a poor substitute, but it works.
It totally does. And you still feel fancy throughout the week. So that's what matters.
So one that I thought was crazy is inhaled formaldehyde from a new carpet. As we're getting ready to buy a new house with brand new carpet. Like,
yes. Okay. So, oh my gosh. Did you hear about my carpet story? Like when I just went apeshit and I ripped out all the carpet in our house one day?
No.
Okay. So yeah, so on like my intake form for my new clients, I literally ask them if they have carpet in their house and where. Because if it's like in your bedroom or your office or somewhere that you spend a lot of time, that gives me a clue as to like the toxins that you're breathing in. But also carpets are basically like sponges for bacteria and all kinds of other nasty stuff. So that's literally on my intake form. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess it was maybe 6 months ago or even more now where I was learning about like EMF and environmental toxins and toxins in your home and kind of doing what you can control. And we had carpet in our bedroom. And for a little bit, like my sleep was getting worse. And I was just like, what is going on? Like some factor changed and I didn't know what it was. And so I kind of went a little crazy, but yeah, like one Saturday we moved all the furniture in our bedroom around, and Alex and I literally ripped up the carpet. We scraped the glue off the floors. We like vacuumed and mopped everything. So now we just have concrete, which I'm totally cool with. Like it's not the prettiest look, but I'd rather be on concrete than on carpet. So that's literally what I did. And we haven't really done anything, but I'm cool with it. Concrete look is kind of, modern.
It's totally in. Yeah. Yeah. So we upgraded and it really pissed the builder off, but whatever, and got wood floors for our upstairs because they were going to do it all carpet. So our basement is all carpet and the stairs, but everything else is hardwood. That's good.
It's good to have the wood floors.
Yeah.
Minimize the carpet. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. Now, other common causes of leaky gut: food allergies, stress, right? Negative emotions and thoughts. I know that's wild, but like totally, it really affects your gut.
Oh yeah.
Gluten allergies, lactase deficiency, abnormal gut flora. So there we go, back to the bacteria, the parasites, the yeast, that kind of stuff. So I mentioned that all earlier.
So, talking about antibiotics, penicillin, which was the first antibiotic, didn't really enter main healthcare until 1939. So just thinking about when we think of penicillin, it's like, oh my gosh, that was invented forever ago. At least that's what I think. When I think about penicillin, it's been around forever. The last law, like major federal law for personal care products, was the year before penicillin was invented.
That's crazy.
I just had to throw that out there, guys, because it's just crazy.
Yeah.
To think about that.
It's wild that a lot of this stuff was introduced back then. And especially like what you're talking about, like laws implemented in like the Personal Care and Safety Act, all that kind of stuff hasn't been changed since when penicillin was introduced into the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all like, penicillin is old. But
it's not that old.
It's not really that old. So, since the 1950s and 60s, antibiotic use has been frantically prescribed for, seems like every infection, inflammation, ear infection, bronchitis, and sore throat. But what is really sad in this situation is that these are infections and viral in nature. So the antibiotics, they're not only damaging, but they don't work against it, and they're unnecessary. I mean, it would be kind of like fighting off a sword with an Advil. It's not going to work. And, it's just like, think about how many people you talk to and they're like, oh, I just called my doc and got a Z-Pack.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? Why? Yeah.
Like you didn't try anything first. You just hopped right to that.
Yeah. So this was just before I knew any better. I got bit by a fire ant and I am highly allergic. So I had a client who I went and gave her a chemical peel, and she was an OBGYN and her husband was literally a brain surgeon. And so they looked at my foot and they're like, ooh, that looks bad. Like you should probably go to Doc in the Box and see what's going on. And he gave me a Z-Pack for a fire ant bite that was like blistered up.
That's nuts.
I know. Yeah.
It's so sad how misused prescription medications are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was crazy. And then that was kind of like a downhill spiral for me after I took that. That was when I had some major gut issues going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, our whole conversation today is about how those antibiotics give you leaky gut and put you on that downward spiral. So it's wild. And that's why, America is in the epidemic that we are today, because so many doctors don't know what to do anymore when people come in and talk to them about their health problems. So they're just like, oh, here's, this pill for your high blood pressure. And here's this pill for, anxiety, when you may or may not even have anxiety, but let's just call it that. Mm-hmm. And it's just, here's your Z-Pack for your ant bite. It's wild.
Yeah. And, I think some of it is that we've been trained as consumers or patients. If we don't walk out of the doctor's office with a prescription, we'd be like, oh, why'd we even go then? Mm-hmm. And it's the way that they're trained in medical school to, so we're not saying anything bad about you guys, doctors. You've just been trained poorly.
Yeah, I mean, not at all, but it is just the mindset of modern medicine. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about what antibiotics do and how they destroy our beneficial bacteria. So they create damage in two different ways. So the first is by destroying beneficial bacteria. So that's what they do. Like when you take an antibiotic, they wipe out all the bad bacteria because that's what they were designed to do, right? To make you healthy by wiping out bad bacteria. But the other downside of that is they also wipe out all the good beneficial bacteria that's supposed to be in your flora. Mm-hmm. So that's not good. And I mean, your small and large intestine host over 500 different kinds of beneficial bacteria. So wiping all of that out is pretty traumatic for the gut. Mm-hmm. Those beneficial bacteria perform hundreds of functions required for healthy metabolism and immune function and just overall good longevity and health. The body also secretes bile. So bile is used not only to break down fat, but it's also a lubricant to flush out waste out of the liver. And they also detoxify many of the poisons accumulating in the liver, also being your antibiotics, right? But so if bile gets into your large intestine, it's actually extremely dangerous because it's damaging to that epithelium lining. So you have to be really careful. Mm-hmm. But,
Oh, and then I was just going to say, when you do take these antibiotics, as you commented, you destroy these bacteria and the bile salts freely enter and damage your large intestine. And this can contribute significantly to the high incidence of colon cancer plaguing today's society. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So crazy to think that, it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of like that cascading effect where you're like, oh crap, I took an antibiotic and now I have colon cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of steps in there.
But I mean, that's also what chronic overuse of antibiotics does. I mean, that's what it's leading to. Mm-hmm. So beneficial bacteria also break down hormone secretions that are discharged from the liver into the small intestine. So if you lack that beneficial bacteria to break down estrogen and the intestinal permeability has been altered, then most of the time people are now reabsorbing estrogens in their original state, which is not good, right? Like that's a toxin that you're just regenerating. So a lot of times, like on a stool test, when you see high beta glucuronidase, this is a marker that is indicative of recirculating these estrogens.
Very, very interesting.
Yep.
And then
And
these estrogens, is this where you're going to go? That they get deposited into sensitive areas such as the breast, uterus, or ovaries, contributing to, if not causing, fibroids and tumor. And this is also the same scenario is responsible for PMS.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, basically to just kind of recap everything that we've talked about, I mean, leaky gut from stress, from your environment, from your diet, from overuse of NSAIDs, antibiotics. I always feel like I'm saying NSAIDs wrong, but
I've always said it NSAID.
NSAIDs.
Yeah.
NSAIDs. So basically they lead to all of this dysfunction going on in your gut, right? So they lead to leaky gut. It leads to the recirculation of these estrogens, which causes fibroids, tumors, colon cancer. I mean, it's pretty wild. Mm-hmm. And we wonder like why we're in the state of health that we are today. It's just from something so simple as like the antibiotics, the prescription medications, or the daily stress that we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. But
I
yeah,
don't know what's worse, that or the sword. Short term, well, I don't know. I might take the sword.
Because you can heal.
It heals quicker.
Yeah. I mean,
all right.
Today's day and world. But so your healthy mucosa allows nutrients to pass the barrier while blocking the entry of toxins, right? So this is a healthy intestinal lining. So when there's leaky gut or the barrier is permeable or it looks like fish nets, right? Mm-hmm. Those fish stockings. Basically, when it's dysfunctional, it's blocking nutrients at the damaged villi. So villi is kind of like these little wavy fingerly dudes that are coming off of your intestinal lining, off of the wall. So the damaged villi, they allow toxins to enter into your bloodstream. And so this is also like, you know, when toxins and improper food particles and proteins are entering your bloodstream through leaky gut, through like this permeable barrier, this is also where we get into autoimmune issues.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, in addition to killing off or destroying the beneficial bacteria, the antibiotics are also going to promote growth of fungus. So they're fostering the growth of Candida and other pathogenic fungi and yeast. And this event, more than any other, precipitates leaky gut syndrome. So in a healthy situation, the small intestine epithelium maintains those tight cell junctions, like Megan was just talking about. So these are your Lululemon stockings. So this contributes to the physical barrier involved in intestinal absorption. Now, in addition to the physical barrier, there is also an important chemical barrier within the mucus that contains immune agents which neutralize any toxin that it comes in contact with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Candida extrudes a secretion which causes the small intestine cells basically to shrink. And so this allows intestinal toxins to basically invade through the lining into the bloodstream. And basically the second barrier, like the immune agents in the intestinal lining, in the mucosa, they remain as the sole agent for neutralization, but it's hard for them to do their job when there's permeability. Mm-hmm. So eventually the immune system becomes exhausted, rising to this challenge of trying to keep the Candida out of the intestinal lining. And then the damage done by Candida to the intestinal epithelial barrier, to the intestinal lining, basically allowing the absorption of serious toxic agents and chemicals that then enter the blood and affect numerous organs, including the brain. So that's also one of the big issues with Candida, and you hear people that are suffering with Candida albicans or the Candida SPP, they're having a lot of brain fog or fatigue, or they're just really tired. Their memory is just super bad. They can't remember people's names. They have a hard time focusing when they're talking to someone. Mm-hmm. Basically, like, you know, if Casey and I were having a conversation, it would take a lot of energy for me to really pay attention and catch on and keep track of what she's talking about, basically. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have those extreme feelings and sensations. So this is definitely the damage done by Candida when it passes that intestinal barrier.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's crazy. Just during our sugar detox classes, I had a guy comment after, like, kind of towards the end of it, when he was just talking about how on it he was all the time. He said, yeah, like every day that I go to work now, I am just like laser focused. And he said, you know, it's just like I'm having my most productive work days every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I told him to ask for a raise. I don't know if he did get it though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you cut out sugar out of your diet, if you've got, especially doing like the restart program, I mean, that's what you're doing. You're cutting out allergens like gluten and sugar and dairy and a lot of like starchier carbohydrates, even just to give your body a break from that form of glucose. You're basically cutting out all of the food sources that Candida and parasites and bacteria, like all of that stuff feeds on. And so when you're cutting that out of your system and you're not giving them a food supply and you're absorbing your nutrients better, like your vitamins and your minerals and your proteins and amino acids from, you know, grass-fed meats and pasture-raised chickens and organic, you know, eggs and all that kind of stuff, wild-caught fish, you're just supporting your body better and you're not feeding those infections. So it makes a big difference. Yeah. I mean, you feel better. And especially talking about like food allergies. Yeah. So that's another big issue with leaky gut. And basically when that intestinal barrier has been compromised, those intestinal toxins are not only pathogens to be absorbed, but the barrier in a healthy state basically selectively allows digested nutrients to enter into the small intestine when all is ready. So when you've properly done the digestion process, right? But with leaky gut, those nutrients can be absorbed before they're fully digested. So that's what I was talking about earlier about the improper food particles getting into your bloodstream. So the body's immune response through specific antigen antibody markers will tag some of these foods as foreign irritants. And so every time that particular food touches the epithelial, an inflammatory immune response is mounted, which further damages the lining. So what started as Candida, you know, irritation with shrinking in the cells has now been complicated with active inflammation every time a particular food is eaten. So food allergies that are common with Candida issues. So a lot of times when you've got Candida, you've got parasites, or you've got pathogens, you'll have secondary food allergies in response to those infections, right? So even if the Candida is eradicated, but you still have leaky gut, then a lot of times you can still have food allergies and sensitivities. So a lot of times the most common food allergies are definitely gluten and eggs and dairy, like what we've been talking about. So gluten is going to be like your rye, wheat, of course, and oats. Corns and beans, especially soy, and also nuts can be some of the biggest allergy irritants. So the biggest sensitivities. A lot of times you really won't have allergies to like meat and vegetables, but maybe sometimes just depending on what type of gut infection you have along with your leaky gut. If you've got Candida or you've got a lot of bacteria overgrowth or pathogens or parasites, then sometimes people will have a lot of reactions to like FODMAPs foods or specific carbohydrate diet foods, which are going to be like garlic. I hear a lot of people having issues with broccoli and just some of the other, like they're healthy foods, but it's just the way that your body's breaking them down when you have a gut infection. So it just can't tolerate it. But you also really have to take the time to figure out if you have a true food allergy or if it's just a histamine inflammatory, you know, response to like everything that's going on in your gut. Mm-hmm. So that's why a lot of people that are like, I have a lot of severe digestive issues, I'm constipated, I have diarrhea, I'm bloating, I've got gas, I've got pain. I want to do a food sensitivity test because I think the foods that I'm eating aren't serving me and they're giving me issues. Well, you got to take a step back and you have to be like, well, what's going on in your gut? I mean, do you have parasites or a gut infection that you have to deal with before we do the food sensitivity testing? Because if you do the food sensitivity testing, you're going to flag to a lot of foods because of the state that your gut's in. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, when you first told me that, it was so crazy to me because, you know, that's just like kind of the way we've been trained.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, as I should put in quotes, trained, you're like, oh, I just need to get a food sensitivity test, without looking at, okay, maybe we need some gut healing first.
Yeah.
And then have it done.
Yeah. And a lot of times, okay, yeah, I mean, gut infections are kind of like the extreme end of the spectrum, because you can still get sensitivities just when you've got low stomach acid or low pancreatic enzyme secretion, or poor fat digestion. You can still get food sensitivities with just poor digestion. So got to keep that in mind.
I have a question for you. So when you're working with clients and let's say they think they have some food sensitivities, would you do a food sensitivity test as kind of like a baseline, then work through some gut healing protocols, and then do a test again just to see how it has improved and maybe remove some of those highly inflammatory foods to begin with, as kind of like just a baseline?
So no.
Or would you? Okay.
Yeah, I would never do that. Only because, let me explain. So what I always jump to is looking at the gut and figuring out what's going on there. So typically the first step is definitely a stool test, because I want to rule in or rule out serious infections, you know, pathogens, parasites, H. pylori, Candida worms, opportunistic bacteria. I want to know exactly what's going on and what we're up against. So that's always the first step, right? And then we address any gut infections. We eradicate that. We work on gut healing. But at the same time, we are removing inflammatory foods, right? So foods that just tend to be more problematic, like gluten and like dairy. And then obviously just whatever that individual needs. We cater, of course, to the bio-individuality of the client. Now, so we do a stool test, we eradicate whatever we find, you know, we address some gut healing, and then moving forward from there, if we still have some food sensitivities, then yeah, let's do a gut or a food sensitivity test to see what's going on, you know? But yeah, I mean, spend your money where it's worth it. So I think doing a food sensitivity testing and then taking out those problematic foods and then doing another test after you've even incorporated some gut healing, you're still not addressing an underlying issue. You know?
And I ask that just because I've talked to so many people who are like, oh, well, I just need to get a food sensitivity test done.
Yeah, you need to get a stool test done.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It was a leading question for you.
Yeah, no, I loved it. Hopefully someone out there is like, okay, now I know what I need to do.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's always number one. Now let's talk about the role of the liver and the lymphatic system. So the metabolic and microbial toxins that enter into the bloodstream during leaky gut end up in the liver, which has the job of detoxifying and discharging the poisons. So the liver has over 500 jobs that it's doing every single nanosecond of your life. It's pretty intense. It's a pretty powerful organ. So under normal conditions, the liver is taxed just by processing the daily metabolic, waste created by the cells and organ activity. So your cells and your organs all day long just doing the jobs that they do. I call it, like, the way I describe it is they basically make trash. Just like us living as humans on the planet, we create trash. So your liver, along with, of course, antioxidants, has to take out that trash. So you want a good, healthy liver. Now, imagine like further load created by dumping serious intestinal toxins on that liver on a regular basis. There's just a point when the liver becomes saturated and it cannot fully detoxify the poisons, and they're returned into the blood circulation. So this goes back to that beta-glucuronidase marker on your stool test, which is always a good detoxification marker. Now, the blood has sophisticated mechanisms for preserving chemical homeostasis, and it will diffuse as much of the toxic chemicals and the physical debris in the intestinal fluids as possible. But from here, basically the lymphatic system will have to hop into the scene and basically attempt to collect and neutralize the toxins. And so the lymphatic system is basically like this highway flowing through your body, like basically moving everything around. So all of this debris and this trash and these toxins, it's basically getting everything to the liver so it can get flushed out, but also it moves your hormones around your body. It does a lot of other jobs. But so basically, if it's unable to send the toxins to the liver, the body just essentially becomes toxic, right? Because the lymphatic system can't get those toxins to the liver to be detoxified. So your body is just in a toxic state. That's where like microbes grow and they develop, and like the lymphatic system can actually develop chronic swelling, especially in children because they're so small, but they can still get the same like amount of overgrowth and infections as we do. So then they are dealing with the same toxic load as we are, and we're bigger bodies, right? So over a period of time, the toxins will be forced into the connective tissue around the muscles and the joints, causing fibromyalgia, or into the cells, which can precipitate genetic mutations and ultimately cancer, just from having such a severe toxic overload in your cells and in your joints and in your muscles. It's pretty wild. And this is all just from a leaky gut scenario.
It's crazy. Yeah, things, again, it seems, no, not a big deal. And then you realize, oh, no, it is a really big deal. It also causes stress to the immune and endocrine systems. So the immune system is going to be stressed in 3 major ways. First is at the site of the intestinal mucosa. As the toxins and food antigens brush up against the mucosa, the immune system mobilizes to neutralize the toxins. So normally, much of this work would have been done by beneficial bacteria, which have been destroyed by the antibiotics. For the toxins that make it to the mucosa, the body will tag them with a chemical, I can never say this word right,
Secretory?
Yeah, it's like secrete, but man, that's a tough word. So
I say SIG-IgA.
Yeah. Yeah. So secretory IgA, SIgA, we'll leave it at that, which attracts macrophages and other white blood cells to consume the toxins. It is not long before the immune response is overwhelmed and depleted. Now, something cool is that this can be measured directly with a stool or saliva test for intestinal SIgA level. Do you do this, Megan, in your testing? Okay.
Yeah, that's on the stool test that I do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now,
cool.
only we would say that.
I know.
It's so cool on a stool test. Now, the second stressor happens in the liver and lymphatic system, which also overwhelmed puts demands on the immune system. And the third stressor is a consequence. As the immune response diminishes, more microbes, so this is going to be viruses, bacteria, and fungi, multiply, allowing for a chronic state of infection. Now, the most important organ in the production of immune agents seems to be the adrenal gland, and leaky gut syndrome slowly diminishes adrenal function. In the early and middle stages, there is actually an adrenal excess as measured by excess cortisol output, but eventually those cortisol levels are going to drop, and now one has exhaustion. Dun, dun, dun.
Yep. Classically described as hypocortisolism.
Oh.
I mean, some people are familiar with the term adrenal fatigue, but I don't like to say that term.
Yeah, because it's not actually a thing. Like,
right.
It is, but the term.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, immune system gets worn out, affects the endocrine system, affects the adrenal glands, and you get yourself into a little bit of a pickle. And that's where like the extreme fatigue and the tiredness, but also like the brain fog and word recall and all that kind of stuff comes from.
Would we also see some weight gain around the midsection? Like a little cortisol tire?
Yep. Excess cortisol. And the other thing too is when you've got a leaky gut scenario going on, and so your liver and your lymphatic system and your immune and your endocrine systems are all out of whack, right? Just annihilated with toxins and just burden, then that's a lot of the times where we get people with like the cortisol belly, but it's just really hard to lose weight when your body's in a state of like chronic stress. This is all a stressor on the body. So your body's going to try to address all of this and fix what it can before it's going to focus on losing weight. So that's another thing too that's important to take note.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now talk to us about how the role of the digestive tract in leaky gut.
Yeah. So, okay, when you've got Candida, it basically just flourishes when the terrain in the intestine favors, Candida. So that's, again, antibiotics wiping out all of the beneficial flora. So all the opportunistic flora or Candida tends to repopulate first. So kind of making an environment or a terrain where it loves to thrive. Now, just killing Candida is usually not successful because the chemistry and the vitality of the terrain has not been normalized, and so Candida returns, which is exactly what I mean by wiping out the beneficial flora along with the bad, and then boom, the bad comes back. So antibiotics are the original cause of the change on the terrain, and by killing acid-forming bacteria, so it's going to be like your lactobacillus, bacteria produced in lactic acid, the environment becomes alkaline, which promotes Candida. So Candida loves alkaline environments. It doesn't like acidic. So that's why it's always good to take your digestive enzymes. Antibiotics and chronic illness reduce stomach acid production, so contributing to the alkalinity and then also allowing poor digestive absorption. So many people with leaky gut syndrome are malnourished and will lose excess weight no matter how healthy the food is that they eat. Now, that's kind of interesting because sometimes it's the other way around. So it really just depends on your body and how your body's reacting to the leaky gut syndrome, the Candida, and everything. Because a lot of times with people with gut infections, losing weight is really hard. Mm-hmm. But the idea that the lactobacillus or just a really good probiotic supplementation is all that is required after Bionex is somewhat not true. So in fact, like most of the lactobacillus from the supplement does not even survive in the intestine due to the poor terrain. So just to make sure you have like a full understanding of the serious and leaky gut, when the gut is inflamed, it does not secrete digestive enzymes. So foods are they're maldigesting, right? They're not properly absorbed. And then this can result in indigestion, gas, bloating, also called IBS if it gets extreme.
I want to go back real quick to the lactobacillus. Supplementation does not survive due to a poor terrain.
Yeah.
So I imagine this as like just going into the desert and throwing like wildflower seeds.
Right.
In there. Like they're not going to grow because you don't have the good soil. It's not the proper climate. So when people think like, oh, I just need to, go
take some good probiotics.
Go, oh my gosh, what's that yogurt called? That
Kefir?
Jamie Lee, no, the crap yogurt that Jamie Lee Curtis talks about.
Oh my gosh, I don't watch TV. I don't know.
Why can't we remember it? I'll look it up.
But yeah, and I mean, taking a good probiotic is beneficial, but you also want to be really careful about taking a good probiotic because you don't know what your terrain or what your gut environment looks like. And if you're potentially taking a probiotic that's feeding the overgrown strands, then you're just causing more of an issue. So you've got to be really careful with that kind of stuff. Definitely, I think
the yogurt. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The yogurt is called Activia. Don't just take Activia.
It will not help your gut.
It will not.
It will not.
Sorry, Jamie Lee Curtis, if you're listening. Okay, I totally derailed you there. My bad.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm taking a good probiotic. You just have to be really careful with that, again, because you don't know what is going on in your gut. So you don't want to be promoting already overgrown strands. You want to be promoting yeast that's actually going to combat your Candida or whatever parasites or pathogens or whatever you've got going on. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing to be really cautious of. Digestive enzyme is always super beneficial. And if you don't have a good digestive enzyme, apple cider vinegar works wonders. I mean, you can literally take like 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar in an ounce of water, like 5 to 10 minutes before your meals, And apple cider vinegar does so many beneficial things. It helps produce hydrochloric acid. It helps the liver produce bile, which bile breaks down and emulsifies fat in your gallbladder. And it also is great for phase 1, phase 2 liver detoxification. So there's a lot of benefits to just doing little things like that. And of course, casing, I've talked about this, chewing your bite 20 to 30 times, taking 20 minutes to eat your meal from first bite to last. So it's all these little things. But yeah, just be careful when dosing with probiotics on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another one where people are just like, oh, the more the better.
Yeah, so you've got to be careful. But yeah, guys, so this is just some information on leaky gut. I hope that it's been helpful. And now you guys have an understanding of how this stuff happens. And it's really, in today's modern world, it's definitely a big issue. And I think a lot of people are walking around with this, more than we realize. And so doing what you can to really take care of yourself, but also if you think that you're having some serious issues with your digestive system, or this kind of whole scenario sounds like you and your lifestyle and what you've been through, then definitely contact someone, work with a functional medicine practitioner, because these protocols, you can really start seeing improvements pretty quick. It's not like a year thing, it's much sooner than that. So definitely.
Yep. I think the lesson for the day is get a poop test, stool test. Call you, get a stool test. And don't take Activia.
And don't just run out and get a food sensitivity test.
Yes, I love it.
Well,
all
cool,
right,
guys.
friend. Well, always great chatting with you. And we will see you guys. Well, you'll hear us next week.
Yep. Take care till
All
then,
right.
guys.
Bye.